Oppan Gangnam Style. Gangnam Style.
What's up, my Wizards? Dev from the place with the decks. Here's one right here. We got $10 Simic Aggro today, something I know a lot of people are pretty excited about. Now, it took me a little bit longer to put this video out than usual. That is because this deck went through an extra couple of days of testing, and it's changed form a couple of times, mostly to keep within budget, but there are a couple of different things that we can do right now for very, very cheap in Simic. I'm going to go ahead and go over them. Well, originally, this deck was more mid-rangey. It had Sagu Maulers and Icefall Regents and stuff, but honestly, we're a little too slow, especially against other decks that ramp or play big things, you know, at the top of the curve, because they really just outclass us, and we were too slow to deal with the really fast decks. So I decided to go as low as I could possibly go here for this Simic deck, and it started picking up games against some of the slower decks in the format. Control, Green-Red Devotion it picked up a game against, so this deck is going to look funny, but I promise it has worked. So let's go ahead and hit you with it. 23 creatures in the deck. We're playing 8 1-drops. Like I said, we're trying to go very, very low here. 4 copies of Faerie Miscreant and 4 copies of Gudul Lurker. Yeah, $10 deck. We got to work with what within our confines here. Faerie Miscreant has been very, very good. Even if you never draw the other card off of her, she's still a first turn 1/1 flyer, which with some of the combat stuff that we're doing in this deck is actually a pretty good deal. And when you do draw the card, because you've already got one in play, that's just awesome. Like, it's really, really good to draw that card, especially in an aggro deck. Gudul Lurker, I was a little hesitant about putting into the deck when I first decided to make this more tempo, you know, sort of an aggro deck. But he has impressed me, it turns out. He's usually worth a few damage on his own, and left unchecked, he'll deal like 6 damage for you over the course of the game, because after the 3rd or 4th turn, there's really like they have better stuff to remove than Gudul Lurker, you know? So, good creature, it turns out. I was surprised. Before I move on to the 2-drops, you could play Servant of the Scale in this deck. It depends on how low you really, really want to go. But I really considered Servant of the Scale did not ultimately play him. We'll move on to the 2-drops. We got 3 copies of Icefeather Aven and 3 copies of Stratus Dancer, both of which are morph creatures. So that's really good. Gives us some versatility and a little bit more of a long game. Obviously, Stratus Dancer can help us counter mass removal and even spot removal. That's very, very good. And against other aggro, this can counter plenty of things, Stoke the Flame, stuff like that. Icefeather Aven has been really good, and I wanted it to be. I mean, again, just like Stratus Dancer, even if you don't play it as a morpher, it's still a 2nd turn 2-power flyer, which is awesome. Finish off the 2-drops here. 3 copies of a weird one, but one that works. Elusive Spellfist. We're playing an awful lot of spells in the deck, and we've got a minor in our creatures, at least unblockability theme. You know, some evasion in our flyers. We've got Gudul Lurker, and now Elusive Spellfist, both of which can't be blocked. Elusive Spellfist, you have to play the spell first, but we'll be doing that, don't worry. Not only that, good blocker against other aggro decks, and, you know, hard to kill. I mean, they can't just Wild Slash this guy. They cannot just Wild Slash him. He's out of range of a lot of things, and we may lose Lightning Strike in the upcoming format, so that would be awesome for a creature like Elusive Spellfist, you know? So I'm a big, big fan. We'll also lose Stoke the Flames, which would be the thing that kills this, even if it could prowess, but you know, we'll lose that too. So I think Elusive Spellfist gets really good in some ways. I like Spellfist. I always have. I like this creature. 4 copies of Bounding Krasis, kicking it off the 3-drops here. Bounding Krasis is insane. Yeah, it turns out Bounding Krasis, I think, could see some standard play in this environment, coming up especially. And just a 3-power 3/3, he flashes in. That's crazy. He flashes in, and he'll tap a guy. Like, there's just so many good things about this card. I see no reason not to play this. It seems to be the deck for it. You know, we're obviously very tempo-oriented. We want to get creatures through for combat damage, especially after pump spells and stuff like that. This dude really helps, and we have a 3/3 guy on the board after all is said and done, you know? I love Bounding Krasis, and it's done nothing but overperform in testing. 2 copies. Silumgar Sorcerer, I can understand if you wanted to put more in, to be honest with you. I just wanted to keep the 3-drops low, and Bounding Krasis was such an all-star, I really couldn't cut him out of a playset. Silumgar Sorcerer, though, is good against other aggro decks, and it's even good against, you know, bigger decks. Obviously, they're going to be playing a lot of creatures, Green-Red Devotion, stuff like that. And even Green-Red Ramp in the upcoming format, which I've been testing for a while. Green-Red Ramp coming up is freaking nuts, and I can't wait to do that deck tech, but I have to wait till BFZ comes out, or is at least fully spoiled. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Yeah, we gotta counter creatures. We have to, because blockers on the board sucks, and a lot of creatures outclass us, especially once we get into the turns where we can cast Silumgar Sorcerer. So, a very, very important card. I can understand if you wanted to play more copies, but if you did, I would suggest adding a land. Here are our spells. We have 3 copies of Might of the Masses right here, and 4 copies of Titanic Growth. These are our combat pump spells, and they work super well, it turns out. Might of the Masses is a little better. I was really thinking, like, I was hesitant to include it, because at first I was like, well, are we really running enough creatures? 23 creatures, is that enough? None of them produce tokens or anything like that, so I don't know how good Might is, but Might has been very good. It's especially good as an instant speed removal counter. You know, they'll try to wild slash your guy or remove him in some other way through, you know, burn. And you can just protect him super easy. Later on in the game, and when I say later for this deck, that means like turn 5, you know. When we're swinging with more than, you know, just a dude or 2, this card is really good. It can often be 1 mana +4/+4 +5/5. Might of the Mass is very, very good and helps us get through combat damage we would not otherwise have done. Titanic Growth, I can say the exact same thing. I hate the card costs 2 mana. I tried to go very, very low, like I said, with this deck. And I want more 1 mana pump spells. We lose, Gather Courage, the awesome Convoke pump spell. We lose that, and that sucks. But Titanic Growth is very, very good. Obviously, your opponent does not expect you to be playing a card like this, first of all. And makes even, you know, Faerie Miscreant unblocked to get through for 5 damage. Elusive Spellfist ends up getting through for 6, and he's unblockable. So there's just all kinds of cool stuff you can do with Titanic Growth. Obviously, Gudul Lurker, he's unblockable. He gets through for 5 damage off of Titanic Growth. So these pump spells are actually really awesome. We're playing 4 copies of Disperse in the deck because, again, we're a tempo deck. We really just want to get stuff off the battlefield for a turn so that we can swing in and pump our dudes up, you know, stuff like that. So Disperse has been invaluable. It's very, very good removal. And we are playing a couple of copies, too, of Reality Shift right here. But at the same time, Reality Shift is good. It is very, very good, and it takes care of huge threats, which I think will be more important in some ways in the upcoming format. I mean, if people are going to try to make Ulamog a thing, then Reality Shift gets better, like, immediately. But in any case, that, again, aside, Reality Shift is okay for us in this deck because obviously the 2/2 that it leaves behind can in a lot of decks manifest up into something way more important, and that sucks. And a lot of our creatures will still trade with it, which is not ideal, but Reality Shift is good for getting huge over-the-top creatures out of our face, which is very important, because after the 4th or 5th turn, we'll start getting outclassed severely by creatures like Siege Rhino, big dragons, and the like, you know. And in the upcoming format, Eldrazi and stuff like that. So we've got to get huge threats off the board. And the same thing with Disperse. We've got to get huge threats off the board, even for just the 1 turn, so that we can get some combat damage in. We're playing 2 copies of Send to Sleep. I've pretty much gone over, just go back and listen to everything I just said about those, because you're technically just getting creatures off the board for 2 turns. In a way, this is better than the other 2 cards, after Spell Mastery especially, because tapping down 2 guys for essentially 2 combat steps of yours is insanely good, it turns out. And against other aggro decks, you're essentially assuring they don't get through. And this is, again, really good against very, you know, high up on the curve decks that play enormous creatures. You don't have to worry about them hitting you for a couple turns, and you can breeze right by them. Send to Sleep has overperformed in testing, to say the least. I really like the card, but I wouldn't play too many more copies of it than what I'm playing here. And finally, 1 copy of Become Immense. Another pump spell, right, but we're playing, 15 instants and sorceries in this deck. We're playing just enough to where Become Immense can be a 1-of and be fine. Now, I could play a 2-of, you're probably right, guy in the comments section, but oftentimes we are not secure in that. I started off with a 2-of Become Immense, and honestly, I see it too often. You know, people will be like, 1-of, but a lot of decks, you know, you see the heroic decks play a 1-of, or sometimes 2-of, but very not often anymore. Become Immense. Become Immense is a very, very powerful card, and a lot of times 1 dude will get through for combat damage, and that's immediately at least 7 damage, you know, oftentimes 8, even 9, so Become Immense can end the game for you in a hurry. But that being said, we're not playing, like, for instance, Send to Sleep. It doesn't have very good synergy with Send to Sleep. We gotta have at least the 2 things in our graveyard for Send to Sleep. Become Immense, not great synergy with that. So I don't want to play all the copies of it, but it has been very, very good in testing. 21 lands in the deck. Now, again, if you add that 3rd 3-drop, I would totally suggest more lands. And we are obviously playing some more 3-drops than it looks like, because we're playing Stratus Dancer, we're playing Icefeather Aven, so we have some 3-drops in the deck. But that being said, you know, a lot of these very, very, very low-range aggro decks play anywhere between 18 and 20 lands. I think that we can just cheat 1 more land into the deck and play our 3-drops just fine, which has been working out in testing a lot. The deck is not incredibly hungry, but it can be somewhat hungry, you know. You want to Titanic Growth a guy and be able to Silumgar Sorcerer something away that same turn. turn, or on their turn. You want to be able to disperse and Titanic Growth on the same turn, or Might of the Masses. And these things take mana, so the deck has not been incredibly mana starved in testing. I did have to add a land. It started off as 20 lands, which was just that was wishful thinking and foolhardy, it turns out. But this is the land base we ended up with, and obviously if you have more Yavimaya Coast, throw them in. I just had to stay under budget. And here's the board. Some interesting things out of the board. Obviously, Mizzium Meddlers wasn't a main deck for a very long time, but felt like as a 3-drop it just wasn't where we needed it to be, and I wanted to cut down on the number of 3-drops in the main deck. But against aggro decks and decks that play a lot of spot removal, this is a fine card, it turns out. And just flashing it in at the end of their 3rd turn is really not a bad deal. And Temur Sabertooth is really good against decks that want to go long, your green-whites and stuff like that, and even your green-reds, because we can get a lot of value out of creatures like Icefeather Aven, Silumgar Sorcerer sometimes, depending on what we're exploiting. Faerie Miscreant, we can use it to draw a card every single turn, Stratus Dancer, we can just counter any non-creature thing they want to play. So there's a lot of stuff that we can do. Obviously, Bounding Krasis, tap a guy every turn. There are definitely some really cool tricks with Temur Sabertooth, but he's a 4-drop, and I just really didn't feel like we could comfortably fit him into the main deck at such a price. Before I move on to the power rankings, I do want to reiterate, there is a mid-rangey, like $15 Simic deck out there that uses, Icefall, Regents, Sagu, Mauler, but I just feel like it's right there in the middle between mid-range and aggro, and it just doesn't work the way I wanted it to. It gets, run over in the early game, and it gets pounded in the late game, and I'm just not really sure about it. But it is relatively fun, though. If you had a few dollars, you could make that deck really, really good. You could add Den Protector, Deathmiss Raptor, Harbinger of the Tides, Collected Company, just have at it, Hoss. It's not terrible, I think. But that being said, let's move on to the power rankings. And these power rankings are not actually as bad as they look at first, because the final score of the deck is a 51, which is about where we want to be with these aggro decks. The deck is very, very low. Again, I'll keep repeating that phrase because that was the whole philosophy of the deck's design. Again, if you want to go even lower, you could play Servant of the Scale, which is a fine card, keeps its power on the board even after it dies. That's a pretty good thing. But ultimately, I wanted to play, 1 and 2 drops and really keep it low on the 3 drops, but I had to play Bounding Krasis. The creature was so good. So ultimately, the deck ends up with a good score. It's very consistent. It does what it wants to do. The speed rating is pretty high, and it's very offensively minded without sacrificing a ton of defense. We've still got Silumgar Sorcerer, Stratus Dancer, Disperse, things like that. And our pump spells can even serve to be defense. We're playing Reality Shift, so we've got some more defense than I thought we could have in a Simic deck these days. So I think the deck is actually fairly good, and it's a real blast to play, and nobody sees it coming. So how do you feel about this? Because the deck was a completely different deck for the first week of testing, and then the next week of testing it changed into this, and it did far better against a lot of the decks in the field. So which I was surprised by. To be honest, I didn't think that Gudul Lurker would be very good. I didn't think Miscreant would be very good, but turns out that they are quite good cards. And I wasn't sure about the pump spell thing, we'll just try to win early in combat. It works. It totally works for me, at least. Well, that's all I got for now, at least for this deck. We got a couple of things coming up. Don't worry, mono black people. I got a lot of people in the comments like, but what about mono black? I want to see that. You'll see it. Don't worry. It's coming up. I'm going to stick with $10 deck text for a while here. There will be another one very, very shortly. Don't worry. But the next thing that I want to do is something I've been working on for it seems like 2 months now. We're going to do Burn. And here's the catch. Naya Burn. That is red, green, white, burn. There's only one green card in the entire deck. If you can guess what card that is, you get a cookie. But yeah, Naya Burn is coming up next, and I think that deck is actually super good. I've been testing it for a while now, and it's awesome. So stick with us, and like, share, comment, subscribe. All that stuff helps us out a lot, and we appreciate all the, I guess, the attention lately. That's really, really cool. We got a lot of new subscribers to the channel. Welcome to SBMTG. We got a lot of cool stuff coming up for you. So obviously BFZ spoilers are going to happen like super soon, and we got a video coming out with spoilers because we've got some things to catch you up on very soon here. So again, stick with us, man. I appreciate y'all watching. I'm Deb from SBMTG. Thanks for watching, my wizards.